Hey, y'all. It's Juanita Coley, the founder of Solid Rock Consulting, where we help call centers implement technology, optimize the technology that they currently have in place, and build better workforce management teams. I want to welcome you to Call Center Chronicles. Call Center Chronicles is a place for CEOs, call center professionals, tech leaders, and yes, the customer looking to have fun yet thought-provoking conversations around how we improve customer experiences and companies' bottom line. We are on a mission to normalize women in tech and workforce management leadership roles, and we believe that that starts with conversation. Welcome to Call Center Chronicles. Hey, y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Call Center Chronicles. Listen, I'm super excited to have you all with me. We've just been having an amazing season. Like the guests that we've been having, would y'all not agree? They've been coming with the gems, okay? They've been coming with the gems, and I promise you that this show will be no different. I am sure of it. So let's hop right in. I have a guest with me over from UJET. His name much for taking the time to sit down with me today and talk about the things that I really think is important to the industry around future of work, customer experience, employee experience, diversity. I think all of these topics are so important, and we got to start talking about them more. So thank you so much for, being with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I'm super excited. So we met at, I believe it was Enterprise Connect. We were hanging out at Enterprise Connect. Caroline over from Google, she said, "Hey, y'all got to connect." So we did, and it's been history since. So tell me a little bit and tell our audience. Oh, before so I always just hop right into the show. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Okay. If you're tuning in with us live, make sure that you leave us a comment in the chat. I want to see where you're listening in and tuning in from. If there is a show that we have, a topic that we haven't covered on the show, make sure that you write in, let us know. We want to cover the things that are important to you because we're talking about customer experience, right? And you guys are our customers, so it only makes sense, right? So make sure you do that. You can go to solidrockco.net/CCC. So Call Center Chronicles, and that's where you can submit a show topic. You can also, if it's a guest that you want on the show, make sure that you let us know that that's the guest that you want on the show so we can interview them. Okay, housekeeping out of the way. Thank you. Okay, so Ash, tell me, so we talked about kind of how we met. Tell me, I'm always interested in individuals that end up in the contact center space, that end up in the tech space, because nobody really wakes up, right, and says, "Hey, I want to be a contact center manager. I want to be a director of sales." Kids aren't saying that, right? If you go ask a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, they're saying, "I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be, NFL player, whatever." And I've surmised that the reason that they're saying that is because that's what's visible to them. So I'm on a mission to really normalize leadership roles that are in the contact center, that are in the tech space, and normalize what those roles look like so our youth can even actually aspire to be in one of those roles. They don't just kind of happen to fall into it. Like most leaders that I know of, they're like, "Yeah, I kind of fell into this space." So I'm really interested in your path to being the director of sales over at UJET. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You almost you touched upon most of my stepping stones through life there. I think yeah, not quite an NFL player, but rugby over here. So
Okay.
Very similar. And that was my dream growing up. That was my dream coming out of school, and I got to travel the world and play in some fantastic places and meet some fantastic people. Unfortunately, that professional life wasn't as long lived as I'd hoped, but I then found myself back in London. So originally I was living over in Auckland in New Zealand, playing some rugby over there. Came back here around 2012. And just honestly, firstly, the sort of the grand irony of where I am now is that I fell into a job in customer service. Was my first role back in London. I needed a job, and as we all know, customer service and contact center stuff is really high turnover. So there's always roles going. and I was working in customer service for a software company. Fast forward around 4 or 5 months, and I got a tap on the shoulder from the managing director of that firm, and he came over and he said, "Look," he said, "you're really good at getting people not to cancel their contract and not to ask for refunds." I said, "Oh, thanks. Well, have you ever thought of sales?" And I thought, never really, it hadn't registered, like you say. Wasn't on the career list of fireman, policeman, rugby player, then salesman. It wasn't really, that wasn't on the list. So that's what began the career in software sales, and various logos along the way. ServiceNow I was at for a few years. Then I was at TalkDesk, obviously a big competitor to ours now, and funnily enough, and we can dig into this more, but I actually, after TalkDesk, through various frustrations with the contact center industry, I said, this isn't for me. Contact center isn't for me. Customer service isn't for me. There's too many frustrations, right? And I thought that's enough. And a sort of a shout out, I guess, to John Lynch. I'm sure he'll watch this back. He reeled me back in, put it this way. He chased me for a little while. He reeled me back in. And,
thank you, John. We need more people in contact center. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah. And I'm really glad he did, because best place in my career I've ever been is UJET. And a lot of that is down to some of the pillars that you were talking about earlier, right? Around, the diversity, the equality, the inclusion of women in tech. And, the more mature I get, the more I realize how important that is to me as well. So where I've landed right now is perfect for me, and I couldn't be happier for it.
That is amazing. Like, again, it's always so interesting to see people kind of matriculate through their career and where they land up and what passions they end up discovering. Like, again, what was it that John said that reeled you back in when you thought, like, first of all, what were some of the frustrations that you found along the way that you're like, I'm done with contact center? Because we see that a lot as well, right? That's part of my story and part of what my mission is when we talk about getting more people involved in technology and in contact centers, because people a lot of times think of contact center is the place where your career goes to die, right? And it's not. It really can be a breathing, and of course I'm so in love with contact center that I might probably bias a little bit, right? But it can be a place where your career goes and it goes to flourish, and you learn so many different things, and then you take from it what you need. You add to it, you add value to it, and then you move on. But what was it about contact center that was bringing some of those frustrations out for you, and what was it that reeled you back in?
Yeah, so it's funny. There's a few sort of common threads, I think, that go through, all the way from my sporting career through now to professional sales and specifically in the contact center. And one of the big things for me is that I'm a big believer, and I think what helped transition me from sport into software sales and then specifically contact center was my mantra, my belief that people buy people, right? We all know the contact center is a really, really busy space when it comes to vendors, right? Now, ultimately, if you leave a lasting impression and you leave a true relationship with the people that you're trying to sell to, they remember the person before they remember the software. We've all been there, right? And I'm not gonna go through the list of vendors.
Come on, you better preach, Ash. Yes, people buy people. I love that. So, Ash, your first time on the show, so I gotta let you know we dropped gems on the show. That was a gem dropping moment. Okay, people buy people. I love that.
I feel special right now. That's good. That's good. So yeah, I feel it's one of these areas where, frankly, what grew into part of my frustration with that is, I was out there trying to build relationships with people, and ultimately, if you look at the largest competitors in the industry, what I think the wider frustration is that they've been singing the same songs for 20 years, right? We've got great call quality. Okay, I should hope so. It's the contact center.
Right.
We're highly available. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, we're highly scalable. Geez, okay. What else? The sky's blue. So when I came from a real rocket ship in the early days of ServiceNow and moved then into the contact center space, and I really did see, people joke that contact centers in the past, but it's the vendor's responsibility, right, to match the ambition of the teams in the contact center and ultimately the customer's demand, because I think that's what I feel. I feel sorry for contact center staff in the sense that customers are living in a modern world and demand modern customer service. and the agents understand them because people by people, so they're in the middle of it saying, hey, I get it, I feel your frustration, I'm trying to find a solution for you. And vendors have been stuck there talking about call quality for 20 years, so yeah, when I stepped away from, or when I took 6 months out, so, and that was in the middle of COVID, and John Lynch called me here, the chief revenue officer here at UJET, say, come back in, we want you to build a team in Europe. And I was like, selling contact center software? Are you kidding me? Never. Like, not doing it. I don't want to sell anymore.
I'm out.
Cool.
Is that Mark Cuban who's that? I'm out.
I don't want to do it. Yeah. Whatever you're trying to get me to sell, I'm not selling it, John. Now what's interesting is what reeled me back in is both really simple, but I think is really underrated, right? For me, the fundamental issue when it comes to what vendors are missing in this space and what UJET is addressing is that the whole concept of a contact center is to reduce the gap between a company, any given company, and any given customer. That's it, right? We don't need to complicate it any more than that. Of course, there's a huge amount that goes on in between. There's a huge amount of people in between. There's a huge amount of technology in between. But ultimately, the headlines of it is reducing that gap, right? Now, the one thing that the industry has missed all this time, and luckily it's still on silent, but I've got it here, is the supercomputer sat in our pocket, right? It's been sat there for decades now. You go right the way back to the days of the App Store, the iPhone, everything like that. Yet all along, as I was saying just now, people are still talking about call quality. Why aren't we talking about what visual and contextual information can I give an agent to reduce that gap, right? Now, as soon as I saw that from UJET and as soon as I heard John tell this story, that for me, I was like, thank God, praise the Lord, someone's come and reduced that gap finally. Someone's got rid of the 20 years where I think the industry, I think vendors got lazy, right? It was a very niche industry. If you were to go back 5 to 10 years, the space wasn't as busy. There's been a huge amount of new players in the last 5 to 10 years. But if you look back 5 or 10 years, the space wasn't as busy. There were maybe 4 to 6 big competitors, and they all just talked about the same thing, right? So it was time to get it shaken up, and thankfully I'm at the right place to be doing that.
And that's how you got pulled back into contact center. I know when we met over at Enterprise Connect, one of the things that initially intrigued me about you or sparked my interest was you were talking about some of the work that you guys are doing around diversity, equity and inclusion, getting more women involved in tech. Tell me, why is that so important to you, and what made you say, hey, Juanita, we should talk about more about diversity?
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, look, nobody's talking about this enough, and you're a huge perpetrator of it, but I know that you could do more, right? There's always 1% more, 1% more. We can always be doing more to address these issues. And it's always front of mind for me, and I do always try and address it in my teams day to day, and I'll get to that part. But, the bit that really sparked me was again, as you say, we met out at Enterprise Connect. And Caroline Yap got up on stage, and she was part of the panel, and it was like I don't know if you use the same phrase over there, but it was like a wet fish in the face for me, right? It was a big old slap, because the question to the panel, there were 3 guys, 1 girl, which was Caroline Yap, and then there was a male host as well, right? Now the question was, can each of you give one example as to how automation is going to help us in the contact center? Something pretty basic. And each panelist gave 1 point. Now, Caroline, obviously being as senior as she is at Google, she stepped in and said, well, actually, on the subject of automation, I'm in the CCAI practice. I've got 2 points I'd like to raise. And the host jumped in and said, well, actually, everyone else gave 1 point. And Caroline said, that's a story of how women have to work twice as hard in tech to get recognized. And that, for me, her standing on stage and announcing that to a couple of thousand people, sometimes, unfortunately, it takes that shock therapy to go, damn, like, you're right. And it's, the diversity on that panel alone, called that out, right? For me, it boils down to what you're saying, right? And I think you may remember we had a back and forth on a LinkedIn post of mine just recently. We cannot allow it to continue to have the lean towards 70-80% of the people in this industry, certainly senior leaders, are old white men. It's a fact. It's controversial, but it's a fact, right? And if we continue having this be the case, then how are you going to look down at kids in school? How are you going to look down? When I have children, I don't want to look to them and say, hey, I'm going to I'm going to the Excel in London today. There's 5,000 people at this conference and not one speaker is female. That's not acceptable. I don't want to tell that story to my children.
Yeah.
And I think it's too easy. I think too many people. So you can tell you've pushed my button on this one.
Yeah. No, so, this is good. This is good.
So it's too easy for people to say, oh, there's an event with 10 speakers and 2 are female, so that's progress. No, it's not. It's not progress. And it's too easy to let 3, 5, 10 years go by and for not enough change to happen, and then for you to believe that you made a difference in your career. We didn't, right? We can make it change now. It just needs buy-in. That's all it is.
How do you think we get away from, and I know this is going to be a tough one. I know it's going to be a tough one. How do we get away from, like to your point, we have 10 people on the panel and we got 1 that's there that's female, or 2 that's there that's female, or, how do we get away from, we would call it, I'm not sure if you've heard this terminology, being the token, right? Being okay with the token, like, hey, you're here just because of diversity. You're here just because we have to be able to check off that box. How do we get away from that and make sure that at the core, out of those 10 people that are there, the 2 that are there, the 3 that are there, we are really saying, hey, you're here because you add value and not because you are a token. And I'll give you a little context more behind this question. I saw in a comment on LinkedIn, someone was like, well, if those 10 people that were speaking there were just so happen to all be men, is that our problem? And I'm like, so you mean to tell me in all of this great wide expanse universe, there was no, Beyonce, for heaven's sakes, are finding whole female bands. So, so she can find a whole female band, but we can't find women or African-American people who are leaders in their space. And when we do, we are supposed to be joy that we are there, like we should be appreciative that we are there. That comes from having token mentality. How do we get away from that?
Well, firstly, I'm insulted that I wasn't invited to be the token in Beyonce's girl band, right? I'd have loved to be up there just as a token to have a white guy there, because we all know someone would have complained about it somewhere, right? Now it's a serious point you raise, and I wish I didn't have this example, but I do. But the core problem is that it starts at grassroots, so to speak. It starts at the bottom floor, right at entry level in your career, and the biggest thing we can do is be an ally, right? And I had 2 conversations similar recently that play into each other. Just this morning, and I'm sure we'll get onto some of this, but just this morning I had a really brief conversation about mental and emotional well-being, just in the workplace in general. And I said, the biggest thing we can do is normalize areas of saying, hey, are you really okay? Asking twice. Telling people it's okay to feel down, it's okay to have these issues. We need to get rid of terms such as, oh, it's soft, or man up, or whatever these archaic sayings are. Now, in doing that, it means that we can be authentic when we see these diversity and inclusion conversations and challenges unfold in front of us. And that's the second piece that I want to get onto. I wish I didn't have this example, but a colleague of mine who will remain nameless, of course, was at an event here in London last week, and I was on holiday, and I got back and I said to her, hey, how did the event go? She's brand new into her career. She's killing the software world. Really, she is. She's 6 months in, and she's doing what I was doing when I was 6 years in, right? Like I wish I had the talent and the belief that she does. She was one of very few women at this event, and she had a male colleague of ours with her. And as they went around and greeted the room and greeted different vendors, different partners, different customers, she pointed out to me when I returned that she actively noticed that people would not shake her hand, would not include her in a conversation, would look a different way, wouldn't take her point seriously, all these different areas. Now, again, I think probably 3, 5, 7 years ago, something like that. If you'd have told me that happened in a room, I'd have gone, really? I'd have had to really look for that, right? But and that is a sign of slight progress that we've made. It's good that the conversation's at least on the table. But just as we do with mental and emotional well-being, we need to make sure that we're an ally to people in those scenarios as well. So a perfect example there, and this is an easy thing to do. You don't need to be confrontational. You don't need to call someone out in public. I understand how uncomfortable that can be. But if I'm asked a question directly in a group and I notice that a woman, be it a woman of color or a person of color or just a woman itself, is being excluded from that conversation, then something that I do immediately is I say, yeah, absolutely, that's a really interesting question. And Juanita was actually commenting earlier today about X, Y, and Z. Bring that person in, be that ally, right? Be the person in the room that wants to help that inclusion. Because if we're not making it happen at the ground level, it's never going to happen on stage. It's never going to happen on panels. It's never going to formulate in the bigger picture.
Yeah. I think that is so powerful. We have to do more allyship, and I was recently talking to someone and they were saying, well, Juanita, we hear these words, mentorship, allyship, and, what's the difference between the two? And I liken it to, mentorship being, me giving you advice, helping you, develop you. And allyship is me walking you in the door, I'm here. I'm an ally walking you through the door, making sure that you are successful. Those are two different levels of commitment. Both of them take commitment, but I think both of them are very needed. And we get them mixed up. A lot of times we're saying, oh, we're an ally. And you're not an ally. You are more of a mentor, or maybe you mentor and you're thinking, hey, I should be ally, but so I think we really need to define that more rather than just have, hey, I'm an ally, or hey, I'm mentoring, because, I think that is one of the hangups when we talk about getting people from that next step from entry level roles, right, to medium or mid-level roles to senior and executive level roles, is they need an ally. We need an ally. We need to be mentors to make sure we have the skill set so that we're not, facing imposter syndrome to feel like, oh no, we're just a token that's here, But when we show up, we know, hey, no, I know what I'm talking about because I've been mentored, right? My skill is developed, and now I just need an ally to let me in the door. I think those are two different things. And so that's how I think when we're talking about combating that token syndrome, it starts with mentorship, making sure that that person has the skills, they have the goods, right? And they can combat that imposter syndrome to feel like, well, maybe I don't really, so that they show up confidently. And then from there, we need allies, right? We need allies for those folks. So I think that's super important. Go ahead.
No, like I say, the fact is, if we address at the ground level the token in whatever term of the word, if that token isn't being invited into the conversation to show their knowledge, to show their experience, to show their expertise, then we're never going to get rid of that token symbol, right? So we need to normalize it. We need to invite them in to show their point of view. And trust me, 9 times out of 10, they know more than me, that's for sure, right? Let alone anyone else in the circle. It's really easy to see that they've got the expertise, and it's upon us to invite them into that circle.
I'm interested, Ash, how do you think, so one of the big topics in the constructs around the show that we talk about a lot is, customer experience, because that's what we're talking about right now as it relates to contact center. And I'm known for saying, I know people are like, okay, Juanita, we know, right? Like, I'm known for saying, if you don't have an employee experience program, if you're not concerned with employee engagement, employee experience, then your CX program is probably trash, right? So when we think about that, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges around facing the industry today around CX?
Yeah, great question. I think COVID did one of two things, or certainly did two things, right? One, it sent us all to work remotely, but two, it sent us all to find true teamship, right? Now, when you look at the experience of working from home previously, it came with the moniker of, well, I guess that person wants to sit on their sofa. I guess that person wants to sleep in late. I guess that person needs to pick up kids before they finish work. Whatever it is, working from home prior to COVID looked like an excuse or a perk of some description, right? Now, those companies that are really embracing and understanding that, we're humans and going back to people by people, we have to buy in to what our employee experience is. We have to understand that, working from home can actually provide you with a healthier mental and emotional well-being state, be it having to look after children, be it, if you're not feeling well, you can log in a little later if you need to, provide that flexibility, or not have to work at all, but have that flexibility and capability to work from where you need to. Now, understanding and providing that actually galvanizes a team, right? We've seen it time and time again. When I first landed here at UJET in Europe, we didn't have a physical office and we didn't feel we needed one for a long time. We've only just recently got one, frankly, because the hiring's going through the roof and we've got to point the mail to somewhere, right? So, but really embracing people's needs and wants to work from home. If you do it the right way, you can actually really galvanize your team as opposed to making them feel as if they're all remote.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think about myself, I think I get people get the best of me when I have time for me. Mm-hmm. As an introvert, right? And most people are like, there's no way you're an introvert.
You could have fooled me, Juanita. You could have fooled me.
As an introvert, because that I am, as an introvert, people get the best. Juanita, they get the contact center whisperer. They get, they get all of those things when I actually have time for me. When I don't have that, because I am very much so an in my head person, and I need the data, I need the analytics, it needs to line up and all those things. I just think about myself as it relates to some of the points that you made, as far as like, sometimes when you're able to work from home, if you're feeling sick, you get to log in a little bit later because you don't have that travel time, right? You don't have all of those different components that you have to combat with when you have to work in the office. And not saying that office, locations are that is dead, right? Because I think you have people who are extroverts who they crave people and they crave that energy. And so I think you have a mix of the two. But I think finding out what that is, organizations actually finding out what that is for the individual, right? And making sure that that's a part of their CX program, their CX experience. That's what's going to be the core of their CX experience. I can't serve you until I can serve me. Same thing with your customers, right? Like you can't expect the customer service rep to give 100%, go over the top when they're dealing with conflicts internally.
Yeah, and it's I know it's a cliche phrase, but we've been saying it on airplanes for a long time, right? Put your own mask on first. And if you're doing the same when it comes to your employees as well, if I enter work, feeling healthy, feeling fit, feeling fresh, feeling as if I'm valued, then I'm going to give the best to my employees, and they're going to get the best growth. They're going to get the best allyship, mentorship, as we were just talking about, and that means that they deliver the best customer experience to our teams as well. And I think that's something that's commonly missed is that everyone in any company is in the same two roles. Everyone sells and everyone is in customer service. It's a fact, right? And again, we have to deliver the best possible customer service when we're selling to make sure that our customers understand us, and we have to do the same on a customer experience standpoint. But again, you're absolutely right. It comes down to making sure that we're performing at our best to be able to pass on the best. Make sure you put your own mask on first.
Absolutely. So one of the other pillars that we talk about a lot is the future of work. When you hear future of work, what does that mean to you, Ash?
That's a tough question because hopefully no more lockdowns, no more forced work.
Hopefully,
let's hope that's out the window. I don't know. The future of work for me is again reducing that gap between customers and people. Right. I think again something that's really key is just going back to what you were saying. Getting the best out of people means making sure that they're able to look after themselves. Right. If as companies we can get to a stage where we understand that some people perform better in a social environment and therefore perform slightly differently in a professional environment, we've got to embrace that in the way that companies interact with each other, the way that we sell, the way that we provide customer experience. So technology will play a huge part in that. I'm not a big believer just yet in things like the metaverse or, jumping in and running around with your avatar and things like that. I think it's a personal experience, right? People by people. Geez, if we all end up in the metaverse, I need a new saying. People by avatars. I don't know.
Listen, I don't know. I had on my Oculus the other day, and I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, so, I'm starting to dip my toe into, AR and the virtual reality and all of those things. So I'm super excited about that, to see where that takes us.
I look forward to a lesson in that. Hey, you can teach me that.
I'm no expert. I'm just now getting my toes dipped in. So I'll let you know what shapes up. But I definitely think it does have a place in the future of work for sure.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you just said is, and you said it earlier in the show, is reducing that gap between our customer, right? I think that is one of the things that the future of work, the constructs around the future of work will be all about. Like, how do we do that? How do we, and those are the questions I think that we should be continually asking, is how do we reduce that gap between us, the company, and our customer? Because ultimately it's all about making sure that the customer feels supported without losing ourselves as a company, right? And making sure that our employees feel like they have what they need, they're supported to make the customer feel that way. I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a funny old world, the contact center space, in the fact that I think it's probably the only other industry outside of just direct sales. I always say that the blessing and the curse with sales is that it is directly measured. It is the most measured job, right? Until I walked into contact centers and I was like, hang on a second. All right, we got average handling time, we got first call resolution, we got, capacity, we got this, we got that. The list goes on in statistics, right? Now, it's dangerous following all those statistics when you're trying to reduce the gap between a customer and a company, because you can't measure everything by statistics, right? You can't measure your people's performance purely on statistics, because, again, when people buy people, it's about having your people deliver your company's message, but in a personable way. There's a great statistic actually that we have in some research from Google, which says that 72% of people prefer personal interactions, but it doesn't always have to be with a person or, a virtual agent, for example, or a virtual chat. Now, making sure that you enable your technology to tell the same story that your people are telling, but in their own personal way, is a huge part of reducing that gap. And if we're not doing that, then, it's ultimately, it comes down to the vendor's responsibility. Going back to what I was saying at the start, like, vendors have let down the space for a long time. We all know what the contact center world needs, and agents love them, are working their fingers to the bone, right? They're trying to deliver this customer experience. They're trying to deliver the right company message, and all too often vendors are letting them down.
That's good. That's a whole show right there by itself. Like, how do we make sure that our technology, our vendors, right, even if it's not technology, how do we bridge that gap to make sure that our front line is supported? Because if our front line isn't supported, right, they could be the best, they could be the most enthusiastic person, they could be the most revved up about whatever it is, but if they don't have that support, or the support is so convoluted, so complex, like I was doing a show and we were talking about the difference between data and information. And I think a lot of times we have a lot of data at our disposal, but it's not information, right? Mm-hmm. It's not information. I can't do anything with it because it's just a lot of information. This is like me just yelling out. You would think I was crazy if I walked into your office and was like 834, 291, 618. You'd be like, somebody,
working in sales, with the amount of measurement I get, trust me, if I hear numbers, I'm panicking. I'm looking around like, which statistic is that? Which number?
And so until I give it context, it's not information that I can actually do something with. So we do stuff with information, right? We collect data so that we can give it context. And so I think in that same vein, when we think about our vendors, there's no endless supply of vendors, right? Like you said, over the last couple years, vendors have been entering the space at an unprecedented a rate, right? It's how do we put that vendor in context with our processes and our company culture to make sure that we're actually supported and we can use what it is that we're actually purchasing, which is, again, why our mission at Solid Rock is to annihilate the user adoption gap between technology and the user. Like, that's all, that's the purpose, right? That's the mission. Because all too many times companies are buying solutions or they're working with vendors and they're just scaling a bad process. Or, because technology, that's all technology is going to do, is going to scale a process, right? And so it's either going to scale a bad process or it's going to scale a good process. The choice is yours. But I highly recommend that people generally, when I go in to an organization, let's talk about your culture. Let's talk about your processes, right? Yeah, I know you need a phone solution. Yeah, I know you need a workforce tool. Yeah, I know you need this. But let's talk about the processes that this technology is going to support, because unless we talk about that, we're just going to scale a bad process, for everybody to see.
But you make the perfect point there, right? And we can glue two things together here in the sense that if we go back to the analogy of my colleague being stuck in the room there and being the only female in the room and not supported in that conversation, and then we look at what you were talking about with regards to information is one thing, but data is something entirely different, right? Now, if we use the analogy of the room that we were in there with just a single female, and she's more junior in her career, right? I guarantee if you speak to the other 90% of the people in that room, yes, have been doing it 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and congratulations to them on their career, but they'll give more data, whereas the junior person in the room who has a fresh outlook and sure, could be naive to some things, could be new to some things, may not understand all the data, but you'll get clear information from them. And like you're saying, that's the same when you translate that to the contact center, right? It's the same when you translate that to the contact center. If you go and talk to team leaders, to management, to budget holders, they'll say to you, average handling time, first call resolution, cost per call, all of these different statistics. If you go and speak to the people on the front line, to those contact center agents, they'll say, hey, I spoke to Mrs. Coley last week and this was her issue. And I think maybe we need to handle that use case differently, right? I think we can really glue those things together, and that's why we've got to be good allies, both in technology and in equality as well.
That is so good. And also why executives should be talking to middle and frontline is because, you may have data, but you don't have the information. You don't have the context because you're not on the phones, right? So you don't understand when I'm saying why this needs to happen. You're just looking at the number, right? With no real context around it. Man, that's so good. That's a show all in of itself, for real. But I told you, didn't I tell you we would get to the bottom of the time? Like, the time goes like this. Yeah, tell me, we're at the bottom of our time, but I want to know what's next for you. What's next for UJET? Tell me, give me some inside scoop, what you can give me.
I want to make sure I don't get slapped on the wrist here. No, honestly, next for me is just I'm pushing the button of I'm pushing the boundaries of making sure that we scale and hire equally. Right, I would rather take more work on my back and get the right candidate, the right quality in my team, and make sure that it's the best thing for the business, because it is. We need that diversity of opinion, and that's across experience, sexuality, color, creed, absolutely everything you got out there, right? If you don't have a mixed bag, you're not going to get mixed opinion, right? So for me personally, that's what I'm loving doing. I'm loving building the team here over in Europe, and it's having a big impact on the greater scale of UJET globally, and it's part of the journey that I'm really, really loving. For UJET more widely, what comes next? Keep your finger on the pulse, Juanita, okay? We're going to need to get some more people on the show, because there's a lot to talk about. There's, obviously back in March where we met at Enterprise Connect, there was the Google announcement that they were entering the fray, and that's UJET technology behind the scenes. We're incredibly proud of that. I know both teams are working incredibly closely to bring more fresh technology to the space, right? Trust me, I promise you'll never hear me talk about call quality and availability, right? We're going to talk about some fresh things. we're gonna bring some new
call quality is important now. We can't.
Hey, look,
it's a fundamental. Stakes, right? It's a fundamental, But we ain't gonna do call quality like that. Like it's not important. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
Imagine if I was trying to sell you a car and I turned up and I said,
it got wheels.
This car actually comes with 4 wheels. So you'd be like, cool. I should hope so. So yeah, we're going to bring some new stuff to the space, and again, we're going to keep working closer and closer. The best part about that partnership isn't the technology; it's the people behind the scenes. Right, we're working really closely. We're really excited about what we're doing, and I'll leave the marketing teams to announce all of that. Before I get slapped
all right. We won't get you in trouble. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ash, for hanging out with me today. Hang out in the green room. I'm going to wrap the show, and I'll be right over with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Juanita. A real pleasure.
Absolutely. Hey, so that was Call Center Chronicles. That was Ash. That was Ash. I'm over at, he's the director of sales over at UJET. And amazing. Like some of the things that I thought was super, super important that, he honed in on was that the reason why diversity is so important. When we start getting those diverse opinions and those diverse thoughts, then we ultimately make better decisions, make better technology, make better all in, now you guys know that I'm always talking about customer experience, employee experience. And I think the thoughts that he had around, why that's so important and his path and trajectory through where he's at now, that was so insightful, impactful to me. I would love to hear what you guys thought. Leave me some comments in the chat below. Listen, again, okay, want to be a guest on the show? solidrockco.net/CCC. And if you want to tell us about a topic, right, that we have not yet talked about that you want to see covered on the show, make sure you go to solidrockco.net/CCC. Listen, I am super excited about the next guest that we have coming up. So make sure that you tune in, same time, same place. Till next time, Juanita Coley, the Contact Center Whisperer, also your Mrs. Corporate America 2022. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.